G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and so far a fantastic week. Now things are moving very quickly, so some of the information you get on where the map could be right now may be incorrect, but I'll update you to the amount of information that I have currently in front of me. I have an 8-hour drive ahead of me today, so I am doing the video a little bit earlier than usual. But there is so much fog of war occurring at the moment, and it is very difficult to get a grasp on exactly what is happening up in the north. And a lot of this gets blurred by propaganda accounts and claims of which people have nothing to back up. And this is everywhere, both sides throwing just shit. But this is the first time this year that Russia is losing ground and the first time that Ukraine is making substantial ground. So there's a lot of panic, there's a lot of excitement, and of course, like I said, there's a lot of people just making things up to make themselves feel better or to push forward their narrative. So we're going to talk about the north in length, then we'll look at maps and we'll talk about a few other little bits and pieces today. So let's show you on the map exactly where this is happening, and then we'll talk about the risk versus reward and the gamble that Ukraine is taking. So here is Ukraine in the center of your screen, the capital of Kyiv. The red areas here occupied since 22, the purple since 2014. The red check or blue check means ground either in Russia or Ukrainians' favor that has been made within the last 24 hours. Now, all the news today is coming between Sumy and Kursk oblasts. Now, Deep State map, they have connections with the Ukrainian MOD. Very interestingly, this map is not showing any changes at all. No grey zone, no green, no blue, no nothing, which I think is concerning for the legitimacy of this map, because we know no official Ukrainian accounts or officials are saying anything about this, and this is included in it. They're not showing any of the movement, which is not the role, I guess, of a map. But we did see 2.5 days ago, at this point, 3 days once you're seeing this, that Ukraine launched an offensive out into Russian territory of Kursk Oblast. Something very different about this from the previous ones is, one, this has been significantly more successful, but this isn't using Ukrainian-backed so-called Russian Legion groups. This is using Ukrainian soldiers in a lot of Western vehicles as well, and much more numerous. So this is the area it is happening. I'll break down the maps in a minute, I guess, fully over all of what is actually occurring. So I'm trying to find my thing. But just to give you an idea, this is somewhat how it is looking in this region here. So if you can have zoom in one, have a look at where then the borderline is sitting. There's areas out to 15 kilometers here that have been made and moved towards some of the towns and villages sitting in here. This big one being Sudza in here, about 5,000 people. We'll get into that just in a little bit. But this is a huge gamble for Ukraine, and I believe the stakes are higher than ever on the risk versus reward of this attack. But Ukraine needed to do something. They needed to show the world supporting them, the Western world supporting them, that they are able to seize and hold terrain. Ukraine can't just keep getting ground rearwards in Avdiivka before they go and sit at that negotiating table in November. They'd have no cards in their hand. But like I said, the risk versus reward of this is very large. So we'll go over the risks and rewards, as I said. Now, looking at the risks, it's far more easy to point out the risks here. Potentially, you jeopardize other areas of the front that still have manpower issues and weapon shortages. You could get cut off and incur large losses because the logistics in here is going to be very difficult and Russia's pouring everything into this. And you could potentially jeopardize US support. We'll look at what the US has said about this. And I believe both Russia and Ukrainian pages are misquoting what John Kirby actually said. Now, the rewards here, or the goal here, it's not as clear cut, but you can let me know what you believe. But I think it is to seize some ground to potentially swap back, an opportunity to get a lot of POWs due to being an ambush on border guards who are nowhere near as trained or armed as other military units, and to, of course, inflict large losses on the Russians by then a surprise attack. But the end goal here, or the reward coming of that, it's not quite clear yet, but we do know that this has been very planned, so they must have summed up that the risk and reward ratio sat at least in their favour for this. Now, we did speculate about the nuclear power plant in Kursk. It's some 60 k's in, but we will talk about this as well. Something that isn't being mentioned as much in this, that should be, is on the same day, Ukrainian Special Operations Forces launched missions towards the Tendra Spit. This is down in the Kherson Oblast, down in here. They launched operations against this. The video I'll quickly show you now, but this was launched by Ribs and by Jet Ski as well, so you can go and watch this. This will fully be on the Telegram if you'd like to then watch this video through here. We have seen then videos and attempts like this before by the SOF in this spit. We got very recently, in the last couple of months, we got a video of this that had been flaunted, and we had seen large casualties be incurred there. I think likely they're doing this to target sensor equipment in these areas, as well as looking for potential landing spots for maybe a larger movement through. But again, probably should have been spoken about that this was launched on the same day in areas. Now, another thing that we need to speak about, because it's war, it all comes down to natural resources somewhere, is gas. Now, in this area, that this is one of the only, I should say, station facilitating the flow of gas from Russia through Ukraine is in Suruza. So, exactly where this is exactly where it is being attacked. The gas is being transported to European customers as usual from Ukrainian operators. So they're saying it's still flowing through there. It's so hard to get an idea if Ukraine do currently occupy Suruza or not. It's so up in the air whether it is or isn't. We know definitely on the outskirts, we know there's fighting within, but again, with the fog of war is so hard to cut through. But speaking on this gas, oil and gas market, speaking to the Insider on condition of anonymity, said that the Ukrainian military establishes stable control over the Suruza gas metering station, and Gazprom might halt supplies. So if Ukraine get it, Gazprom may then turn off then the taps, which of course will have a flow-on effect into Europe down the line. Such a disruption would reduce Gazprom's export revenues by close to 7 to 8 billion euros. We know Russia is funding the war primarily through export of natural resources. But for Ukraine, a halting transit would result in annual loss of 800 million, despite the contract stipulating 1.2 billion, because Russia is underpaying Ukraine due to the latter of regex bids for this station. So, of course, the war has a lot to do with this and the payment there, but Russia's still paying Ukraine for that to flow through. But if Ukraine get this and it is able to, or Gazprom have to turn off this, you could be talking about 7 to 8 million euros a year, as well as countries will be affected down the line. Some European countries remain dependent on Russian gas transit through Ukraine. Austria, for instance, 98% of its gas consumption came from Russia in 23, up from 78% in 22. And Slovakia and Hungary, of course, rely on Russian gas through the Suez pipeline. And we've spoken about this very recently with Ukraine limiting that, and where Slovakia and Hungary are saying that there are massive issues being caused downstream because of this. And I do believe this could be one of the primary reasons it was in this specific region why Ukraine pushed here. But we're about 72 hours in, about 65 hours now, like when I'm filming this, and it will be telling to see if Ukraine is able to establish and maintain logistics here to maintain then that movement. This is about the time when things like that on purse in vehicles start wearing out or start running low. Now, this is food, water, rotation of fatigued troops, of course, bringing out wounded or injured guys too. Now, some of this replenishment will be then alleviated because they're in built-up areas, so you will be able to loot things like food, water from the tap, fuel, but you definitely can't do all of it. You need to get and hold those then logistical supplies. This is one of the big issues Russia had then with trying to push further into Volchansk on the two fronts they pushed down in here. Now, something else that's going to happen is Ukraine's going to have to do, if they want to keep this going, what Russia failed to do or wasn't prepared to do in Volchansk. In modern warfare, you have a bubble of influence. You need to be fighting within areas of which, at the front line, your troops and your vehicles are supported by things like drones, things like artilleries, things like air defense and electronic warfare. Typically, that is 10 to 15 kilometers. So Ukraine is, if they want to keep this going, at some point is going to have to broaden that bubble of influence by crossing those assets then into Russian territory. Now, from my assessment of Volchansk, Russia was not actually prepared to do that because, of course, it becomes more dangerous for that as soon as it has it across. And what you also need to do is build defensive positions as you go, so hardening those. So we'll need to see a lot of Ukrainian engineering equipment also crossing. I know some of it has for recovery of vehicles, nowhere near the amount of things like excavators, things like this to build in defensive works. We saw Russia do that in Volchansk on their push as well down from the south. So something else in this, on that 72-hour time frame, is that all available Russian equipment will start moving here right now to try and plug this hole, not only for the PR losses it's having, the large losses it's having, and of course territory that Ukraine is gaining. I think there's a few things that could happen here, and I said the same about Volchansk when Ukraine was, of course, pushing all this equipment there. I think the odds of Ukraine opening another front somewhere could be likely as all that goes and there's a distraction. Maybe they'll open up, bang, somewhere else. Or we could see, as I said, could happen in Volchansk as well, and didn't, that you could see a very speedy withdrawal. You can leave as quickly as you've come and then move into other areas as then everything has been allocated by the Russians to be there. Gaining ground quickly means you can lose ground very quickly. Gaining ground slowly means you can lose ground very slowly due to building defensive works, the amount of troops that are in, what those troops actually are doing for the maneuver warfare, attritional warfare, or what weapon systems they are employing. So that will be an interesting piece to look at as well. And Ukraine's advantage at the moment is that they are moving. So Russia's not able to fully employ things like its glide bomb fabs. But if that comes to a halt, then we will see those more successfully employed. So yeah, we've looked at that. Let's look at what Fighter Bomber says, what the Americans have said, and some other bits and pieces here after my talk in the beginning of how I assess this. But born too late to fight in the Battle of Kursk, born just in time to fight in the Battle of Kursk. There's a lot of history here as well. Something I just want to mention is we did speak about in the phase of what's happening on other areas of the front line. Is it the right time to launch this? Because attritional warfare doctrine, as far as my reading of it, as far as what I am seeing the problems are in Ukraine, it doesn't seem to add up. But again, this is the risk versus reward the commanders have obviously then taken into account. So let's have a look at a couple of strikes. We'll look at the maps and we'll look at what some Russian and Ukrainian pages are saying. So a really good way to look at this is on the geoconfirmed map that they've got too. So this is Suza here, and you can click on these and actually see, and then you can take you to the link of where it is geoconfirmed. So you can see this one up here, rough impacts of cluster munitions against several Ukrainian vehicles. So the reason this is interesting is, okay, then we know then Ukrainian vehicles are X far in due to those cluster strikes. And I can show you on this because I've got this video geolocated on a different map. Some 13.7 or what's that, 8.5 miles in from then the border between Ukraine and Russia is where those cluster munitions dropped. We don't know the impact of these because we can see the clusters drop, but it's on a tree line. Very difficult to know exactly what then occurred here. But these are some of the reasons why moving, digging positions is what is needed if you plan on actually seizing and holding that terrain. And it's not clear if Ukraine are going to seize and hold or try and continue, keep moving. I don't know how the logistics would work, or it's a quick in and out to move forces to have a push somewhere else. But we can have a look, and you can go on this yourself and click on, you know, what is in here as well for Ukrainian vehicles being destroyed or impacts as well. You can see out in here for drones as well as aircraft as well where they were flying, not only ones that have been downed. Now, there's a lot of claims about Russian aircraft going down. I'm not seeing many videos or evidence of these airframes going down. Some are saying Su-35s, some are saying Su-34s. Again, with any aircraft, because of the claims previously that have never been backed up, it needs to be very, very clear for me to believe it and report it as fact. Now, one thing we do have when we talk about aircraft is a Russian Mi-28 here being hit by a drone. Now, we have said it's a matter of time before something like this happens. We've seen them chasing them before, get stuck in like the wake, and they don't have like the oomph to catch up. But this one appears to strike on the tail rotor just here. It passes past like the fin, but the rotor sits a fair way off on a Mi-28 and does appear, well, the drone's exploded and has caused, we're guessing, some damage to this aircraft. Now, a aircraft like this, Mi-28, doesn't have the coaxial rotors a car 52 will have. So a hit on the back here is far more dangerous on an aircraft like this with a single rotor on top for the stabilization. Some are saying that this was hit and then had an emergency land there, and that's what I'm seeing corroborated between the most amount of accounts, but I haven't seen it actually on the ground here yet. But this is something we're going to see absolutely more and more of. We've seen drones almost be hit by Su-25s flying low. We've seen drones try and chase choppers before, but now we have seen one of them damage and potentially force a crash land or a emergency crash landing on an aircraft. So we have a few other videos here that are doing the rounds. Now, this is about 40 Russian POWs then being taken by Ukrainian forces here. We get the photograph of then these guys on the ground, so you get a lot of POWs here. The geolocation on this is interesting because it gives us an idea, sorry, move this on. It gives us an idea of who these guys may be. Now, this was geolocated right on then the border here. So in my assessment that these are most likely border guards, territorial defense guys who may be less motivated than some other soldiers in other areas and less trained and or less armed. These are border guards, not fucking VDV somewhere. So what gives us an idea of this. Now, people are pointing out this is insane. Look at the amount. Ukraine is saying, and has been for years, they're having 1,200, they're killing 1,200 Russians every single day on the front line. That is what the numbers are saying. If that is true, if that claim is true, this is now, of course, these guys are POWs, but if we look at how many POWs are taken to KIA, to WIA frontline, this should be every single day. This is what we should be seeing, if those numbers to be correct, every single day, day in, day out. Now, we have some footage here too of a Ukrainian drone going against then a Russian vehicle. Now, you can see the drone is either working at a lot of range or being hit by EW, so it's very hard to see, so I'll just skip through. You can see there is a Russian vehicle sitting in here. I believe there's another one beside it, and then you see some level of whether it has airburst or something here or has lost connection. But regardless of what it hit, the reason we want to show this is where this is then geolocated, right on the outskirts of Sudza here. So exactly where the troops and where that front line is operating isn't clear. It will then become more clear into the coming days and or weeks. So what have the Russians and then the White House then said about this? So fighter bomber, he's been very outspoken against this. The Air Force is currently working to slow down the counteroffensive of the Ukrainians and give our reserves a chance to approach. The Ukrainians were well aware that in this direction, the Air Force is the only force that can stop them. Therefore, there is simply a lot of air defense on this relatively small section of the front. So they must know that the Air Force is there. There's not that many troops. So we need to put in a lot of air defense. Of course, we saw the 2 air defense systems taken out, the Ukrainian ones taken out then yesterday. Taking into account that the Air Force has been working for 24 hours straight, our losses in helicopters and flight personnel are still very modest. So absolute confirmations of photograph that I've seen is I haven't seen anything fully confirmed of fixed wing aircraft yet, but it does look like there has been something. And choppers, definitely 2, but I'm not sure of many. But again, this could be incorrect by the time you see it, or you've seen different to what. It's pointless to blame someone for the screw up. To find out what they were hoping for and what they're relying on. Now we need to beat the Ukrainians with all available means everywhere without hysteria and panic. And he goes on here too. If the Ukrainians somehow break through the nuclear power plant zone, we will not be able to use aviation and heavy weapons against them. This means that they will have to knock them out with infantry, giving the total multiple superiority of the Ukrainians in FPV numbers as of today. So saying is, if they were to get to that nuclear power plant, that we can't then be dropping bloody fabs on it or artillery, which we have seen happen before in this war. We have seen both sides firing weapons at nuclear power plants, but that it's going to have to be an infantry operation here. 60k is a lot, but 15k's was still a lot. Yes, sir. So Ukrainians covered that distance in a day. So confirmation of how far then this moved. At the same time, we must understand the fattest trump card of the Ukrainians is now not the captured territories, not drones. So again, there's cards if there's going to be some negotiation process. There are people in the captured territories whom the Ukrainians will use the shield and evacuation being hindered by all means. So again, like we've said, if Ukraine came to that negotiating table in November with how it was looking 2 days ago, what would they actually have to then swap back? But what I say here is, depending on the numbers, you're looking at 150 to 200 square kilometres of ground has been got. Even if it's a 1-for-1 swap, if you have a look on the actual front line, or even a 2-to-1 kilometre swap, how much is that really going to affect things? It's still, I guess, questionable. Now, there's been a lot going around of what the Americans have said, and I think people are misquoting this, both in, like, they're misquoting it to make it look worse than it is for them, like with the pro-Ukrainian accounts, and I don't get it. So this was at a question with John Kirby at the White House. I wanted to ask about Russian and Ukraine. Putin earlier today said there was a Ukrainian incursion in the country's southwestern region and called it a, quote, large-scale provocation. Ukraine has commented about the scope of the operation. What does the White House know about what happened there? Can you comment on that? So Ukraine has made no comment on this. Zelensky has spoke to Syrsky, and more will follow, but officially there's been absolutely nothing. It says, I'll let the Ukrainians speak of their operations one way or the other. That's most appropriate. I'll refer to the Ukrainian armed forces to speak to what they are doing. Not that there's been anything come out yet. For the amount of footage we're getting is very, very limited. We had the actual same from Russia in Volchansk too. We're going to stay focused on making... Oh, that was my school that I went to year 12 in calling me. We're going to stay focused on making sure that they need to defend themselves, of course, and I would just add that nothing has changed about our policy with respect to enabling or encouraging strikes or attacks against Russia outside the bounds of course, what we have permitted them to do with US weapons in the past, which is target imminent threats just across the border. And this is something that, in this, is vastly different from what we've seen. It is American vehicles crossing over here too, Bradleys and Strikers. And was there an imminent threat right there on the side of the border? It doesn't seem like it, not like a missile coming in or a plane coming in to drop something. The last thing I'd add is that we are, as you would expect, we would be reaching out to the Ukrainian counterparts to get a little bit better understanding. So saying, hey, the fuck is going on over there? Can you let us know? But I think it's going to be interesting to know, and we will probably never know, what the Americans actually think of this and what involvement there actually was. Regardless of public statements, we don't know how much planning and ISR was actually given to Ukraine to make a mission like this possible. Probably a lot. I don't think Ukraine would be doing much without the US knowing about it, because if you're to jeopardize that relationship, that would go really badly. That said, maybe Ukraine is, I guess, sort of sticking it to the man going, we're fucking doing this anyway. We need to get back to the ground, whether you give us it or not. One thing that I was told back when the Legion were doing crossings is that it's a fantastic way to get saboteurs into Russia. So during this chaos, during the fog of trying to reinforce things, trying to take things, that it's a good way to get guys to cross in civvy clothing and then fuck off into Russia, get out and then conduct DRG operations, so reconnaissance saboteur operations within Russia itself. We have seen a number of those come out as well over the past time of this operation and occurring. So I spoke about the White House. Look at the Kremlin has said this is about 16 hours old at this point. Putin, good afternoon. Colleagues, please report on the situation that is developing in Kursk region along the lines of your departments. Putin, I think, would be pissed. Now, Gerasimov says, On August 6th, the units of the Ukrainian armed forces, numbering up to 1,000, went on the offensive, capturing a section of the territory across then the state border, together with the border guards and reinforcements. Airstrikes carried out that stopped the enemy's advance. It doesn't look like it's been stopped, and that there are a number of groups and agencies redeploying in here, or deploying in here to try and stop the bleeding, and talking about the losses in here. Again, we have no idea on actual losses on either side. So I see a lot of people comparing this and the success for kilometre assessment. Now, we have spoken about before that saying 1K here is equal to a K here, that is not a fair assessment. Because on this basis, okay, you would have to assume that Russia involved Chansk in the first 2 days had more success, had more military might than Ukraine's whole counteroffensive in Robotny. If you take in just kilometres squares captured, and 1K somewhere is significantly different to a kilometre somewhere else. If you take into account who's there, how defended it is, and if we were to use those measurements, if we were to say just the amount of kilometres gained in a day is the measurement of how well an operation has gone and the military might of that operation, not the other factors that can allow that to happen, you would actually say then that Wagner PMC had by far the best day in this entire war when they went back into Russia. So let's have a look at the maps. Let's look where some things are sitting, and then let's look at the other areas that are moving on the maps as well. So Syriac has a lot of updates for us. So does War Mapper. Now, where I want to actually start, so we'll come down here. Of course, this map's not showing shit, but we'll come down and I'll show you War Mapper's map. Now, War Mapper is normally very, very conservative towards any Russian game here. And today he's actually seemingly very conservative. This was post 6 minutes ago, so 40 minutes ago I probably got this. Very conservative compared to other maps about how much Ukraine's got. It's now confirmed that Ukraine controls at least 90 square kilometers of Kursk Oblast. For example, Russia controls 150 square kilometers of Kharkiv. So this is the opposite of where Warmapper normally sits, and I've shown you that before, between Warmapper showing less gains by the Russians compared to even like Deep State. But I think working off pure then geoconfirms alone, you get an idea of how this map then may be looking. But what he's probably referring to a lot of is not contested areas, because you see the check out here is all then contested grey zone. So absolute confirmation is probably more that 90 square Ks. Conservative, but accurate. Anyway, let's have a look then at this over Syriac. So this, we have, I think, 5 updates here. You can see this bubbling out through here as well, and this is a day old, but we'll go to the newest ones. Kursk front, Ukraine offensive and Kursk intensifies after the initial attack. The Ukrainian army has continued to advance along the north of then these localities by these blue dots. This axis down here, this is the Suduza axis. The Russian army seems to have stabilized the front for the time being and expelled Ukrainian forces from the western suburbs of the city. From the locality of these, relieved pressure on the half encircled troops as well. So there was some half encirclement here. We'll continue because things do change on this map. Just 48 hours, Ukraine captured 183 square kilometers on Russian soil. See the difference between Warmapper there. This is why we show multiple. This figure is close to 200 square kilometers captured by the Russians in Kharkiv. The objective of this operation remains unclear, but it is possible the Ukrainian command has thought of creating a reverse operation to create a buffer zone on Russian territory and to provoke the diversion of Russian troops to this front to the detriment of others located on Ukrainian territory. However, this strategy is not enough to establish a change of tendency on the Donbas front, since there are already enough Russian reserves on the northern fronts to stabilise the situation. The only other front being affected is being the Russian buffer zone in Kharkiv, where the balance of forces is beginning to tilt slightly towards the Ukrainian side. So could we see Russia completely withdraw from that like Kharkiv axis and come in here, and both sides then just have a net change of 0. The amount of ground capture between these two is actually very similar. So think of the celebration and panic on one side a couple of months ago, and then similar then today. Now, continuation here, you can see between his two maps how these have then linked up and expanded out as well. And that link up is what, if I was a commander, I would be happy with or concerned of, depending on what flag was on my shoulder. But at 1900, the Ukrainian operation continues with no sign of slowing down. The withdrawal of Russian army from a large area of the border allowed Ukrainian army to take control of the localities in here. So, of course, across then the border, the Ukrainian forces re-entered the urban agglomeration of Sudza, where fighting is going on in this. Meanwhile, clashes continued north of Zeleny between the two sides without significant changes. So up in the north, no significant change from saying then the day prior. Let's come up to then his most recent, as we see, further expansion and push into Sudza then itself, at least then 50%. Ukrainian army is advancing towards the localities here and here, so in these directions. Meanwhile, some kilometres south, Ukrainian forces took full control over these, most of these, and the town of Sudza being the river and the current front, front line. So if we come in, then in Sumy, come down to Sudza, that the river running through here, current front line. So probably over 50% of control here. Again, wait and see, we'll get a better idea. Now, something I see a lot of people talking about is the fortifications in here, that now Ukraine is actually in behind these fortifications, which yesterday they weren't when we reported. So we'll have a look at this, and this is how at least this is looking. It is furthermore down here past this line now, but this was just what the fortification map showed then today. But we can see this red checked line. That is more of where the sort of grey zone overall is potentially sitting here too, but that a number of defensive works have come under control. Now, Rybar said this. They created an unprotected sector on the border, which the enemy took the bait on. So what Rybar is trying to say is that, see this area here, where it was unprotected, that this was on purpose to try and pull Ukraine into here to then have counteractions. Now, I don't believe that. I think I use Occam's razor theory on this. Is what is most likely. The most likely is that this just area wasn't that heavily protected and Ukraine took the opportunity to do it. Same as Volchansk, that there wasn't some overall grand strategy that Russia looked at Volchansk, said the defensive works here, this is the weakest point to go. You've come in and you've got 6, 8, 15 kilometers in a day or so. But this does have, like then Rybar spoke about, the potential to jeopardize other areas. And now we will have a look at the maps and see. And as you can see off the bat, that the Avdiivka front here has had very large movements just today. So let's scroll back. So we saw like little movement, very large movement today. And this could change a lot. And remember that this war is still going on down here. So again, this is going to be very interesting in here for whoever is left in these positions, in these tree lines, to get out of the one of two directions here. This is then backed up. I haven't named these maps, but I'll be able to see them by then Syriac map in here. He's showing, again, the same amount in even the same areas. These maps are very, very similar in here, that they're advancing in additional Russian forces to control over Serkivka. We have seen, I don't have it on me, but there is Russians in Serkivka raising a Russian flag as well. So we know that, of course, moving closer and closer to Pokrovsk, now at 17 kilometers. But from the outskirts, you're talking under 16, around 15. So, of course, much closer now than to Avdiivka. This is the problem, being the not having the numerical numbers. Russia may be able to plug both at once, and thinning out is probably going to affect Ukraine more. While we're here, I want to look at the defensive works here as well. This is something interesting as well. So we'll look at then the defensive works, and we can see this defensive map hasn't been updated, but you can see which defensive works have then fallen. So between Ivanivka and Vesely, there's some major works that these have now come under control, as well as near Serkivka, then major works have also come under control, as well as potentially some of these works as well out near Novoselivskia, Persha, of course, heading down to where then the water reservoir is sitting here, and ways to then leave this area. So there are major things happening against defensive works on this front. Now, let us move just down to the south of here. And again, we see a major shift on this map here as well. Near Vodiane, of course, heading out towards then the road that connects Konstantinivka Paraskovskia and Ugledar as well. So I believe it's this map. Yep. Southwest Russian army continued advancing towards the TO5-24 road. Again, shows different-ish, but overall very similar. We know movement happened in a similar direction to this. Now, I believe there's no change down in then Robotny or Uruzani, but where is this showing? Oh, this is in Rozdelivkia, sorry. So no change down the south. Come up into Seversk, Rozdelivkia front here. We do see that Russia did have an advancement near Perezheny here too. And this is then backed up by Suryak maps right here along the train line. Again, same basic area. We'll get a good confirmation that that has then occurred. And then we come Bilohorivkia front here. We can see this is always difficult to line up, but just in where my cursor is, saying positional battles where Russian reoccupied Western filtering station. So just up in here, saying there has been some movement. We haven't then seen this today or any sort of grey zone shift. So maybe just wait out on that, as well as there's a lot of pages reporting that Russia has had more successful crossings into Chasiv Yar here, using potentially the time they've got because of maybe manpower or assets thinning out, headed into Kursk Oblast. So I guess we will wait and see. And I want to know your take. Is this jeopardizing other areas? Is it jeopardizing relationship with America? Or is this all part of a larger strategy to take back territory, to have something to swap back? Now, we've spoken about a lot of this diplomatic action that's happening between Mali, Niger, and Ukraine, of course, with Ukraine saying that we had some involvement with the Tuaregs in Mali. Mali then saying we don't want any diplomatic action. Niger then did that, and it'll be, I'd say the whole Sahel alliance will probably have similar. But Yusov was quoted by Ukrainian press saying the rebels received all the necessary information they need. Niger then severed relationships with immediate effect. Now, Yusov has then gone to the Financial Times this week and has said that he made no such statement about Ukraine's GUR being involved in the attack. So he's back stepping on that was ever made or not. Of course, Ukraine's Foreign Affairs Ministry, they were very outspoken and said it was short-sighted and hasty, these decisions to cut ties. So I'm just giving you an update on that. Shit, I've forgotten something. Okay, well, let's head back up into Sudzha here as well around, and we can see, if this will load, where Ukraine has high ground and where they may have then low ground as well. So we have Sumy, Kursk, then Sudzha in here. So you see coming down into lower ground, and as well, if we line up, do I have any maps that I didn't delete? Oh, I deleted my maps. But if we get an idea in here of where this is moving, that Ukraine will be heading back up on some of the higher ground in here too, but will be working their way up. So we will get an idea of how the lay of the land will affect this operation, as we will see either speed up or slow down, as well as with that time frame now of the replenishment of forces. Legends, I don't know how I'm going to do videos in the next couple of days. I'm going into state, but have a great day and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.